I mean, we're recording, right?
Yep. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Kite AI On Air podcast. Today, we're very honored to invite Professor Toby from UC Berkeley Haas Business School to share his perspectives on AI and the involvement of the tech and how potentially this tech has an impact on society, on economics, and Toby has to be a long-term friend to me and Scott. That we actually had also the great opportunity and pleasure to give some also experience sharing, observation sharing to his MBA students as well in the past few years. So welcome to the show, Toby, and please give a quick intro about yourself and your past experience before.
Well, first, it's really great to be here, and congrats to both of you two because in DG we met while you were still kind of grinding the sausage on this one and playing with different ideas, and it's kind of amazing to see how this has evolved, how Kite's evolved over the past year. It's just incredible progress. So congratulations to you both for what you built and all the traction so far. So yeah, I'm a business school professor, have been for a long time, been at a lot of the different good ones. I mostly have run entrepreneurship programs, so I run the entrepreneurship program at Haas, and I have in the past at Harvard and Columbia and University of Chicago. So I've been around quite a bit, and I'm just blown away at what's happening right now. So it's pretty wild. So kind of sitting here watching. My day job these days is AI in various forms. So that kind of ranges from the projects that my research group is working on to what I teach and what I do and the corporate boards I'm involved in and kind of all of it. So I live and breathe this stuff. So that's my background. Great to be here.
That's amazing. Actually, so many questions that I have for you across different fields that you have very, like a deep fit into, from academia to your own entrepreneurship journey to nowadays. Like you mentioned, you're working with a lot of some of the giant companies surveying their board to also guide them in this era of crazy, lack of better word, crazy transformation right now. I'm curious, maybe like one by one, about your quick observation or like sharing. If you pick up one kind of like or two, the biggest shift in, let's say, the academia, because you teach school courses every year. What is the biggest shift that you observe right now?
Oh man,
Okay.
I mean, so there's never been a time like this. I mean, it's interesting because you tend to think of universities as these like kind of protected, particularly the good universities. They just feel like these kind of protected bubbles, right? I mean, as I think like over my long career, like there's the financial crisis, and in 2008, 2009, and the world's caving in, but I think it was at Harvard those years, and it just is like it's, I mean, like at Harvard they stopped serving cookies at the at like the faculty seminars. Like that was the impact of the financial crisis. But this one, interestingly enough, I mean, in a lot of ways, universities are like literally on the front line of this because. I mean, I would argue that we it's literally bizarre. So the graduating class of what year are we? 2026. So the class that's kind of just graduating right now. basically grew up with ChatGPT, right? So it launched in November 22, so it kind of comes out like their freshman year. So first thing, like I don't think we have any idea what the students who graduate this year actually learned. Like, I mean, in the past, if you know, go to a campus that you know and you hire a student in a major that you understand, like, you know, you have a very good sense of like, you know, how they think and what they learned. We do not now, right? Because we know that the heaviest early use of AI systems was on college campus because they are amazingly good at doing homework. So the second thing is we're in the midst of what I would call an evaluative crisis, and that just extends so far beyond college campuses, but college campus, but like front and center in this. So, and that's because we have this system where, you know, if you're in a university, you are required to essentially create a hierarchy of all your students, like, you know, A plus, A minus, you know, so you kind of create class ranks. And, you know, the way you do that historically is you mostly evaluate written work. So we all now know what it's like to evaluate written work, or, you know, you might, so if you're running an entrepreneurship class, you might evaluate, like, you know, the quality of an idea that a student comes up with over the course of a semester, and then the work they do to get that idea off the ground, which is going to be reflected, you know, not going to get past like a pitch deck and a rickety prototype, but like, you know, that's now 3 minutes of prompting. So, you know, so like the evaluative system is next to impossible. Like how do you, in like at the moment, we don't understand how to create sort of rankings of students. So campuses everywhere are in crisis around that. I mean, that problem extends everywhere. So universities are on the front line of it, but now, you know, imagine you're an employer and you're trying to hire somebody. Like you would rely on the written word to make that decision, but it's at this point free to apply for a job, and costless to kind of perfectly match yourself to that position. And so like the information for evaluation evaporates out of that market. And we can go on and on and on and on about the effects of that. And then the third thing is, universities are in some ways the worst version of legacy organizations, right? I mean, they have the challenge of legacy is you build these systems that resist change, and you do it for a very, very good reason. Like, I mean, like people look at like old longstanding organizations and they criticize them for being like, you know, dinosaurs and slowly moving. They're actually built precisely to be slowly moving. I mean, we can, you know, leave the explanation for that one off for a little bit, but universities are the worst version of this, right? I mean, they have these enormous investments in property, plant, and equipment in the form of campuses with super expensive research labs, really high staffing costs, the worst version of labor contracts, which are called tenure, right? So I hold tenure, and so do many of my colleagues, which makes, you know, us like the faculty hard to change, and in some ways ungovernable. So universities are really, I mean, we could spend the whole hour on this, and then the whole day, and then the whole month. But universities are like, it's very strange to be on a campus right now, and the students, of course, are very aware of this. And then the final thing I would add, which
I think Toby, we lost you.
Yeah, I think there is a connection issue. I just maybe I just feel this, so I think this is actually beyond university. Similarly, with the biggest impact on the industry currently is developer. And
Yeah.
Toby is back.
Yeah, I was. I mean, I hope this works. I live in a building that's wired for. The building's wired, and the internet's been going in and out today. And like, you know, like I don't have my own internet. It's all the way through. It's piped through the building. So I'm now on my iPhone. So hopefully, is it still working?
Yeah, it works pretty well. So we actually lost you.
Yeah, right.
When you
I
say
mean,
the third part.
So I'm going to say, so I mean, let me say the final thing, and you can spool it in. So, the final thing that's happening on campus, which I think it leads us to another topic you're going to want to talk about, is students. I've never seen students in such a state of anxiety because they're deeply questioning whether the investment. So I teach graduate students only. The graduate students in particular are like, I spent all this money and all this time getting an MBA. Was it worth it? Will it be worth it? Am I going to get a job? Will I hold the job that I get? And the undergrads are feeling that as well. So there's just this very keen sense of anxiety on college campuses now. Like they don't understand the world that they're about to walk into.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Toby, for your views. I'll let Scott share some of his views, which actually he felt very similar observations in industry, especially among developers, and I'll share that as well. But I felt very consistently as what you observed
So
in schools in other places.
So I think the two biggest group impact by this is for your student and developer. So what happened? I share this example over and over several channels. What happens in last 6 months is that it completely changed the paradigm how software engineers do for last 70 years. Like previously the computer is like a calculator. It's just an advanced version of calculator. So developer need to figure out what's the business logic, and basically just build the entire software engineer on top of a calculator at the end of the day. In this case, the whole compiler is actually just programmed how to have 1 + 1 = 2. What does this equal sign mean in this case? Design whole algorithm around it. But the neural network, the new AI is like neural network. Finally, you have some intelligence, no matter it come from, a black box come out of nowhere. It's completely different shift from a calculator to a neural network in this case, like a very smart beings in this case, like compact by all the historical information and knowledge. In this case, like even the best infra developer today actually don't hand code, don't write code manually anymore. In this case, this is actually create change as well. Like previously, for example, when we do the previously hiring for the engineer, usually Uber has 5 or 6 rounds of interview, minimum 5 to 6 hours of interview. And then at least a 2-hour interview, just do the coding part. We have this, battle tested question, which I use, no matter a system design question or coding question, we use the same question to test like 100 people to benchmark, your understanding of the problem solving for each of the particularly technique you need to solve it correct. But now if you fit the same interview question to AI, it's almost solved like immediately. And it's solved even better than standard answer most of interviewer has in this case. Like even till today, I didn't sell a standard way how to evaluate the candidates. Like this is its own understanding instead of like something just given by AI in this case. Like, so that's why when we do the interview, I'm trying to say, hey, first is that we're actually trying to redesign the interview. First is that, let's say how you're going to solve the problem with AI in this case. I'm trying to design an interview question. We expect you to use AI. We actually want to see how you use cloud code. Like this is actually happening with YC founder interview as well. The YC founder interview, they're going to just interview like half hour, say, this is a problem. We're going to give it to you, how you actually use the cloud code to solve it. But I also want to try it in a traditional way. I want the candidate to solve a problem without any AI help. Because at the end of the day, AI can help you do all the work, write all the thesis, in this case. But at the end of the day, how you can output is your understanding. And every single delivery from, no matter employee or startup or company is limited by human understanding. And this is actually not limited to the developer. I just saw like a podcast from Terrence Tao yesterday. They mentioned this happened to the mathematics as well. So nowadays, this mathematics has this proof, just generate. Previously, the mathematics is limited by the proof, high quality proof in this case, because you only have like a very small finding. Mathematics is not like neural network. You don't need to be every part to be correct. Like if you're building an engineering in this case, you don't need to be every part to be correct. Most likely you have bugs here and there. But if you have one part wrong, it's still correct the result. But mathematics is not. Like one proof is built on top of another proof, on top of another proof. If one of the proof is wrong, the whole conclusion is wrong. So that's why the mathematics is always working as small circles, 3 to 5 people work together as a group work in this case. And then, so that's why you always lack a proof to read during a year in this case. But nowadays that you're not lack of proof. You have tons of proof generated by AI. But humans' understanding now is like not same level as the machine's understanding. So what Terence Tao suggests is that we should have the working path, like the review path for human beings, like the working line and high speed line for AI.
Yeah.
Like sometimes the mathematician's job is not to say, hey, let's actually prove something, but let's say has a proof understandable by other people. The definition of a proof mathematical theory now becomes that I have to have like one mathematician be able to explain to every single human being what does this proof mean in this case. In this case, like not only like explaining every details what does this proof mean, and also just to say, hey, this is actually like a working like a working line. No AI allowed. But in this case, on the AI line, the AI can go full speed, generate tons of proof and argue with each other. I think the impact is universal in this case.
Yeah, it is universal. And the idea that to kind of go back to what you were saying about how you interview for software engineers. I mean, given how radically significant this technology is and its capabilities, it's like we have this view when we're in, particularly it's a very Silicon Valley view, but it really is kind of everywhere, which is you often think you want the smartest person for the job, and so you design these tests and you're trying to get at some kind of version of raw intelligence or ability, and it isn't even clear that leads to optimal productivity in this world. Like in the world we were living in a year and a half ago, that led to optimal productivity. Like you needed the person who could, when there was a bottleneck, it's the person who, it's the 10x engineer, the one who could solve the problem. But you just might not need the 10x engineer anymore. And the most productive IC might be someone who's like just a very different skill set. I mean, it might be as simple as work ethic. I don't know. But the other thing about it that I just think is bizarre and but reflective of what's actually happening is we all have to acknowledge that, like, if you compare the coding agents post 4.5 Opus to pre, like there was this radical shift, right, in ability. And with the shift in ability, you then probably want a different person, right? And because the models, which are now doing the majority of the actual work, are evolving so quickly that, like, the capabilities they bring to the table today are very different than the capabilities they brought to the table last year, which probably means that the optimal person this year might actually be someone who is a little different than the optimal person last year. So this is also a world that doesn't make sense to us. We're not used to like change that happens at this pace. We have not figured out how to live in this world.
I think there is a very interesting, I think there is a very interesting graph illustrates the difference. I think, for example, think about this. The intelligence from 0 to a 9th grade student is probably much larger than the intelligence jump from 9th grade student to like a post-PhD intelligence in this level. I think that's why I think the AI, the neural network, deep neural network to the transformer, the change is always happening, but people not paying attention when the intelligence jump to like a 9th grade or middle school student, but people pay tons of attention when it's just past this threshold to be better than a PhD, average educated PhD. It's always a gradually then suddenly, I feel like.
Yeah, and it did that in a handful of years, right? So if you look at the slope of, I'm always telling people when I talk about this topic, how important it is to not ever pay too much attention to kind of, it's like a flow in a stock, like you don't pay attention to the point where we're at right now, because we're not going to be at this point in 2 months. So like if you're planning, then you have to plan around, the changes and capabilities that are coming, because they're coming that quickly. And that's also very hard for us, right? I mean, we think like we think the current state of things is reality, but when we're building companies or hiring employees or or acquiring an education, what we're really doing is making a choice or an investment that's a long duration choice or investment. And so when you're doing that, you don't want to think about what like the state of the world is right now. You want to think about where the world is headed. And I don't think it's ever been a bigger challenge than it is right now.
Yeah, this actually reminded me pretty much the same comments as Jensen has given in an interview about 3 months ago about the definition of smartness in the future of AI. So nowadays he's like, yeah, in the past, the definition is, are they like super intelligent that can solve, let's say, math problem or like computer science problem? Because usually that's the old way people think, oh, that's at least the technically smart. But nowadays, those type of things become all commodity. Every person can be as smart as AI right now. They will help you to solve the equation problem, help you to put together a production-ready code. Then in this case, the definition of smart to him is really become who can sit at the intersection of technically astute, and also being able to have human empathy, which means like while the technical problem solving is becoming a commodity, the intelligence or the ability to preempt issues, infer the unspoken, and to see around corners, that's what is coming in the future, and also have the intuitive vibe, which actually the intuitive vibe to me is the most interesting thing, which essentially is that how in some way you are considering, like a lot of times people are saying like how a CEO should be able to make decisions in a many like different threads in a more or less, lack of a better word, ambiguous setting, is actually what also he thinks everybody in the future, a smart person, should be able to achieve as well. Is essentially have like a combination of data analysis, first principle thinking, life experience, and wisdom, quote unquote, from him, like wisdom, to be able to allow them to intuitively navigate the unknowable, because the world is changing so quickly.
I mean, it is that I think that's a for sure. Like we all can agree, the world is radically changing, and I think I've lived twice as long as you guys, and in my twice as long, maybe not quite twice as long, but in my much longer time of observation, I've never seen. I mean, nothing is remotely like this, and I don't think it has been in at any point in history. I think this is the fastest version of change we've ever seen. I mean, with respect to Jensen's point, there's an open debate, and my suspicion is it gets resolved pretty soon, but there's an open debate between kind of the people who agree and say this is like, I mean, effectively, this is run past PhD level intelligence, and that and the models in the labs that are already developed but haven't been released are that much further along, and therefore it's like we're going to move back to what's of value as some version of humanness, like call it the intuitive or emotional capabilities, something like that. But then there's another point of view, which is that sort of the smartest or maybe the wisest humans will be able to do more with the models than anyone else, and then their value will be exponential relative to what it was because of the enhancements of capabilities. And so there's a sort of almost philosophical debate about those two things. And but like many things at the moment, there's just I think we're in a state where I have many views, but I think we're in a state where we should all just kind of admit that there are more questions than answers about where things are headed.
Yeah, and also I'm actually thinking the debates you just mentioned might able to coexist in the future. I think on the one side, I definitely felt, like as much as we observed the negative impact AI right now has on, let's say, school students and the developers or some technical professionals. On the other side, I also felt that it's opened a whole new door to people who are, for example, let's say, just compared to developers who are not professional coders. I think, honestly speaking, I have to admit that this is such a great experience so far to me as a non-coder. So I also come from technical background, have done some research work on machine learning, but never wrote a single line of production code by myself before. But nowadays, I felt like working with AI is really like unleash a lot of like the quick kind of experiment implementation and testing that I ever felt that without like a professional coder's help and implementation. Like I team up with Scott for one of the key reasons is definitely I think for the technical coding piece. But I felt AI right now at least give you a playground and the sandbox environment to test a lot of ideas quickly. There's definitely still a place and important piece for professional technical workers like hardcore engineers who still design like the most scalable and secure system in this process. But on the other side, I felt that's open door to many people. Not only I think people like me, but also like my sister and brother-in-law. They're all doing some research work, but now without much like a coding or technical training before from like, for example, like sociology type of fields. But nowadays, I think now they actually, for example, like if you do a lot of like statistics hypothesis testing, it still require you used to have some basic statistical course training and everything. But nowadays, I think by giving the data point, like the data samples they collected from the fields, and then ask AI to help them to do some processing. I help them to take a look at the result because I come from data science background. I think AI has done a fantastic job for helping them analyzing and coming up with the data.
Yeah, let's break that all apart. I mean, so I think we're at a, I mean, no, you're kind of on my home turf with that. So you can definitely, I mean, there's many now sort of multi-agent scientists that are soup to nuts. So, I mean, you kind of say, I want to produce a scientific paper on XYZ, have a conversation about what that looks like, and off the robot goes, and it's, and what you're going to get back is a complete paper with a data analysis that's thorough. And then if you want, you can then interrogate the robot about precisely how to understand the data analysis it just performed for you. So like what you just did to help you're not needed anymore from that point of view. Like it's it's an outstanding interpreter of scientific research. So in fact, I use it all the time. I get opinions about the quality of evidence and papers all the time. And often I think, as long as I've been doing this and at as many great universities as I've been at and having written as many papers as I have, which is a lot, I think it's often smarter than me when it interprets work in my own field. So you're already now in scientific research soup to nuts. As kind of we've recently shown, like you're likely to get some mistakes in there, and the importance of the mistakes, I don't know. I mean, it's going to depend, but I think we're on a trajectory where there'll be a decline in the number of mistakes, and we've seen this. So, so if you just think about Scott, like, I mean, the first time I met Scott, like he's an addict. Like, I mean, he like opens his laptop and he starts, he starts scripting in some language and showing me this and showing me that and showing me the other thing. And, you still need, I think if you're going to build Kite, you need Scott. You need Scots. You need people who understand architecture and integration and kind of the overall system. But if you look at how things have been going and you look at like cognition and the new version of Codex, which is goal based, it seems that like the requirements from the senior developer are sort of like, each week maybe you need them a tiny bit less than you did last week. So, I don't know where it all ends up, right? I mean, I don't think we've seen the end. I don't think we've seen the asymptote on progress in the coding agents. Like, I think, these things are, I'm of the camp, these things are going to continue to get significantly better. And, the world's going to get weirder and weirder as that happens. But my world is full on bizarre because there is absolutely fully agentic scientific research production systems that are just prompting. I mean, that's all it is. And then you get you get a paper, and there's like there's tons of research and conversation about this in what's called the science of science community, which is partly what I do. And if you're in those conversations, like, we're all just kind of blown away at how the quality of these like sort of fully automated papers, like they're entering the realm of high quality human produced articles. So that's where we are.
Yeah. Yeah, Scott, we still need you, but also on the other side, it's definitely getting crazy in terms of how intelligence become.
Yeah, I think Andrew Capacci shared this in AI Ascending Sequoia conference like last month. I think the work will be actually divided into two types. First, like majority of people, no matter you have a technical background or not, you're going to web code, and then it will bring you to a level previously only senior engineer can do in months, in an hour in this case. But again, you still need agentic engineering, agentic engineers. Agentic engineer is that solve like a architecture or like high level, because engineering come from my background. We're going to say, hey, what's going to come in next in this case, like beyond like hey, this is working, but it will stop working after certain conditions. For example, one example I was joking with Chi, like Coinbase definitely don't have the best engineer as Uber, because what happened to Coinbase is that they never actually they never actually really tried this multi-data center failover in this case. They designed the system, but they never tried. So that's why it's caused like a 12, almost like 12-hour downtime, like a few weeks ago. Right at the time, they fired like 15% of engineer. It makes a very bad PR in this case. But at Uber, we know this happening, so we actually tried like rotation the data center every 6 months. So we break down this huge risk to a tons of small risk. That's actually you cannot get it from web coding. That's actually all the practice, all the worst practice, all the worst nightmare happen in the engineering in this case, and then the intelligence summarized by doing in this case, and operating at Uber scale, like a 30 million strip scale. We figured out we have to do this. Yeah, I think.
So let's actually shift the conversation a little bit around that. So I mean, if you think about these two, seemingly disconnected things. So I just told you, like, you can deploy a multi-agent system to write like a scientific paper soup to nuts, and yet there's like. And there are issues with it. So I mean, I'll bracket there are issues with it, and then we could talk about like the deployment of agents at Uber and Coinbase, and then the deployment of agents in like companies that are more non-tech sort of traditional companies, and I think one of the central difference in all of that is. Agentic deployment in any enterprise is it's like a tiny part of a huge system, and the system functions with a set of rules, and in a certain way, and if the system breaks, it's catastrophic, and so you need a lot more there's a lot more work to get an agent to like in a weird way, like a customer service agent is like a way less impressive thing than an agent that can write a scientific paper that's like novel and has a full like collects a massive data set and analyzes it, and and then rethinks, formulates novel hypotheses, and thinks about the evidence against the hypotheses. Like, this seems like a more challenging thing to do than to answer a call at a customer service center. And indeed it is, because like if you think about human labor doing this, it's teams of, like the kinds of things I can now deploy Claude, a set of orchestrated Claude agents to do, would have required postdocs and PhD students and, and collaborators who are all super highly educated. Whereas a call center is, somebody answering a phone who's gone through a very brief training period. And yet, you could argue that it is easier to deploy a scientific research team than a customer service agent, because the scientific research is done outside the context of any complex system. Right. I mean, what it's doing is accessing a database that exists somewhere in the cloud that it has permission to get into. It's accessing a scientific literature that's free to anybody to access. It's accessing its own intelligence that it has access to, and it's writing and executing code. But it's doing all of that independently of any other system. Whereas anything you do at Uber or anything you do at Coinbase, you're doing in the context of I can't even imagine the code base at Uber, like, and how that all kind of spiders together. But you're doing it in the context of an incredibly complex software system, right? And so you end up with this weirdness now, where it might be tricky to deploy an agent to do something super basic in an enterprise. But by the same token, we're watching multi-agent systems create novel scientific papers that are on par with, like, very good PhD, post-PhD level human scholars.
So, Toby, I'm actually then curious about your observation then in among, let's say, PhD and MBA, because on the one side, I was thinking that actually MBA could be empowered more by AI, as again they have good business training, and they actually, if go to, because MBA usually is doing anyway work in industry, and with the intelligence that AI can bring them from technical to analytical to even like some strategic research work, it can boost their, I feel actually it can boost their productivity and the competitiveness a lot, as what we observed. One of the recent new hires we brought to the team, who just graduated from a master's degree in business analytics, so which is essentially the same route as MBA is going. Then with the help of AI, actually he become one of the most promising even product person in the team, because now he's so empathetic to user needs, to business opportunities, but meanwhile he can do technical stuff. On the other side, as you actually pointed out, now PhD can, in some way, like a lot of the PhD work can actually be autonomously taken care of by multi-agent system. And in that manner, are you seeing that actually for those PhDs then are having like the challenges to find their own way?
So this is evolving in real time, and one of the great complexities. I mean, again, a topic shift. So one of the great complexities of figuring out the impact of that AI is having kind of in all of our worlds is we have this simultaneity problem, which is this is all happening during the Trump administration, right? And so academia, as Yuval, everybody in the audience, I'm sure, is aware, is having a whole kind of separate set of issues around Trump, and that includes immigration issues. So that's getting students from other countries into PhD programs and MBA programs, because that's a lot of our students at the great universities are from, in particular China and India, but getting like students from other countries into the United States. And then there's been the the funding issues around, the administration suing universities or pursuing withholding grants, kind of the financing of federal agencies that are grant given, like all of that's happening kind of at the same time as AI is happening, right? So for PhD students, I would say the academic job market right now is super tough. And then, you're going to ask yourself, okay, well, is that AI? I mean, I think it's actually mostly AI, but there's another narrative, and the narrative doesn't have anything to do with AI. It's just funding cutbacks that are necessary because of what's happened to sort of university budgets and university outlooks under the Trump administration. But then, if you ask kind of the risk of substitution, which is what you're asking, like is what's more readily substitutable by the MBA or the PhD. I mean, the way I would respond to that is we're kind of still in the world of tasks versus jobs. I'm not sure we're going to stay in that world, but the reason, the chance for humans to preserve our role in the labor market is if it continues to be the case that agentic systems are very good at narrow tasks, but they're not good at entire, sort of bundles of tasks that constitute jobs. And so, there are many things MBAs do that the systems are amazingly good at doing. And there's some things that PhDs do that the systems are amazingly good at doing. And kind of, which is more substitutable, I think, depends on PhD and what, and then job doing what. So I don't think it's going to be easy to say there's a general, that I think it's very easy to say that the job market for academic roles is going to be tough now and for the near term, at least, as uncertainty hangs over universities about what the future looks like, and as the Trump sort of budget issues continue to roll their way through the system. But the MBAs are definitely nervous about what the job market looks like, and the reason for that, I think, has a lot to do with there's just a handful of employers that typically hire large groups of MBAs from the elite programs, and those are the ones I've been at. So I don't kind of know the state of the world at some of the other places, but and those handful of players are the big tech companies. The giant professional service firms, most of which are consulting firms. So, McKinsey, BCG, Accenture, Deloitte, like companies like that. And, just a small handful of other players. And the consulting firms are definitely feeling the heat. So they're all kind of asking themselves the question about what their futures look like in the AI world. And, does their kind of billing model and pricing model hold up? And is there continued demand for the kind of services that they supply? Or are we moving to a world where you're not going to need a systems integrator in the way that you have in the past if you're a large enterprise, and you're not going to need a consulting project, a McKinsey style consulting project in the future in the ways that you have in the past. And as you know, because you've read all about it and you're in the middle of it, most of the large tech companies are in the process of reducing staff, not adding to it. And so all of that, I think, creates a great deal of pressure on both, the PhD job market and the MBA job market right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Then I'm actually curious because literally on the left side, like you mentioned, is the job market for people who are looking for a job. On the other side now, as you also served some of the board roles at the bigger companies like Workday. And we see from outside of the world, we're living in the startup world, so not like the huge corporate world anymore. But from outside, what we see is, of course, like 2 years ago, the board of the big companies probably all very interested in inserting AI into their earning call description, which actually can bump their stock price a bit. And then the second phase is now people are saying that AI is being so powerful and we need to adopt AI internally. And then people start tracking like the internal adoption rates of AI and blah, blah, blah. And the third phase right now is the crazy last 6 months phase we see all the layoff that people are every single time now using AI as a like a excuse or like a real reason to reduce the main force in the company. At least this is how we observe from outside of the world as a like a non-corporate person. I'm curious if then you have been literally the front line of this interaction with big corporates, how they're really doing, like, or thinking at the moment, and the next step. Yeah.
I mean, I think so. Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, you definitely, I'm an odd person because I have, I guess, a foot in a lot of different worlds, right? And so I'm very much of Silicon Valley. I mean, I've, started a company that's a tech company and spent a bunch of time in venture, and I have run entrepreneurship at these business schools focused on creating Valley-based companies, and serve on some boards of growth stage tech companies and so on. And so, like, this is a huge part of my world. But then I also spend a lot of time, for instance, with Workday. Part of I started the Workday AI board, and part of my job with Workday, or one of the things I do with the company, is I kind of go to these meetings they have around the world where they invite customers, and we have these kind of conversations about what's happening. And so you can kind of take a perspective that's Silicon Valley, and then you can take a perspective that's the US, and then you can take a perspective that's Europe, and then you can take a perspective that's world. And like, those are too many perspectives to go through. Like in Silicon Valley, this is all happening, right? I mean, so Kite, I mean, I was with, you were off somewhere, but I was with Scott at Kite, at the actual company. And I was with Scott maybe, I don't know, what was it, Scott, a month ago? Not more than a month ago. And so Scott was like kind of walking me through what you're doing at Kite and how you're running the company. And what you're doing, like, you couldn't have done it 2 years ago. Like the whole way you're building the company. I mean, you are building truly an AI first company, where it's not just, a sort of agentic payment system, but it's also kind of the way you're actually running the business. Like, how many people you're hiring, who you're hiring, into what roles to do what, is all built around the AI era. And so you're like the front line of it. So you guys are 100% in, you're 150% in. If you then go to like the last generation of tech companies, like, so my company, for instance, we started the business in like 2013, and and are like much sort of larger in terms of employees and what happens there. And so, like, we're trying to catch up to you because we have tech genetics, but we were built prior to the agentic AI era, and there's a lot of things we do that you will never even think about doing or do now because you don't have to do them, but we did, right? And so we have to unwind stuff. Then you have like the bigger tech companies, and they're both at the front line, depending on what company, right? Because like when we think tech is like, it's a bullshit. Like it's a far too broad category, right? So when we talk about tech, like who knows what fits into that box? It's not an industry. It's like, 17 industries, right? So there's many dissimilarities among the tech companies, but a lot of the Silicon Valley tech companies, I think, so it's that cohort of companies that are doing layoffs and scapegoating on AI or not. Like, I mean, so like Jack at Block, the 40% layoff, like, is it completely bullshit? I don't think so. I mean, I think part of it is like, I can use AI as an excuse to do this, but I think a whole lot of it is genuinely, he's kind of the Block leadership team is like watching what you guys are doing and saying, hey, like there's a new way to do things, and it's a more efficient way to do things. And it's a way to get a lot more done. So we should make like every effort to move into this new world. But when you get outside of the Valley, like this isn't happening at all. And when you get to Europe, it's not happening, period. But that isn't to say that AI is not like on everybody's mind, and that there hasn't been a ton of agentic AI adoption in like in U.S. enterprise companies across the board. There has been, but it's in particular places, and it's yet to be kind of fully transformational for orgs. So it's definitely the beginning of the adoption cycle. But it's actually an adoption cycle, and if you have any doubt, just look at what we're seeing in terms of Anthropic's revenue curve and the use of compute. It's large companies that are now buying tokens, tons and tons of tokens, and that's this insane revenue curve for Anthropic, right? That's all agentic AI adoption, and the enterprise is behind a great deal of that.
I think the most crazy part for this is that I don't see a stop sign for this Anthropic. So I'll give you a little bit of context for Kite, just even for Kite. So when we build a data infra company, we process roughly like half of the Netflix data. That's 2 petabytes data. We're burning at peak time, like 250K a month in this case, in terms of infra cost. We do tons of optimization. At that time, almost like I'm working on this full time, say, how could we squeeze like a 60% cost off, just optimize the pipeline, optimize engineering. But now in the data, in the new AI areas, since February of this year, say, hey, you need to spend more token. You need to spend more token. Now I currently say, hey, every single engineer in the team, if you're coding, you should spend minimum $3,000 token per month, because if you're not doing this, you're not output enough meaningful work. And then later on, we probably even have a quota for the business people as well. Previously, it's saving. You need to cut like $10,000 off. Now it's like you need to spend more, And this is actually just the beginning of the curve. Even though Toby, you mentioned we are very AI native first, but I think comparing to the new, like for example, I have a friend running the robotic lab in NVIDIA. Comparing to them, we only like a 10% or 20% of token consumption. So that's why I want to push people use more token here in this case. So that's why I didn't even see a sign for the stop for the Anthropic revenue in this case.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was just actually at a dinner in Boston last night with a group of executives running large, mostly they were running large healthcare systems, and there, a couple people in the room, they were like, okay, so we had done this, we're like 6 months into this program to get everybody to use AI, and now we're already at the point where we're like, you're spending too much, right? We blasted through the budget allocation for token use, and so now, we need to get into a QBR process where we're reviewing, agentic development and token use in the company to kind of figure out where it's economically justified, right? Because, the SOTA models, particularly at the moment now when, has a current love affair with Anthropic, and, they're compute limited and all the things, it is very, their revenue curve in part reflects, this is expensive. So again, it's we get into this, I love moving between the worlds I move between, but I think a lot of the sort of well-capitalized, in build mode startups, which you guys are very much that, are spend. We have a million things to get done, and you're kind of, you're Superman or whatever right now. So go make it happen. But enterprises are a lot more they don't know how to handle this, right? Because you have now all of this kind of grass. There are many problems in enterprise with this, or many challenges, but one of them is enterprises are not used to frontline employees spending lots of money on stuff, right? And now you're kind of at this, they're used to people who are way up the organization requesting budgets to do very specific things. And, the capabilities that this technology creates, it's one of the many challenges that will exist for large organizations is they're not built to handle sort of, frontline engineers blasting through large coding budgets, right? Or frontline employees that aren't engineers using the capabilities of these systems and the harnesses around them to build like functional agents that they deploy in the enterprise.
Yeah, this actually, Toby, reminded me of a conversation I had earlier this week at Stanford with some investors and researchers. And one thing I think it's kind of like, I want to say it's a big concern, but also at least a visible concern that people potentially have on the growth of, for example, like Anthropic revenue, especially when it's come to a lot of the revenue. I think Anthropic, indeed, actually, to me, I think they have pretty healthy sector of revenue. But indeed, part of the revenue is coming from a huge, let's say, startups funding that. Because there's like billions, even like, I wouldn't say trillion, but a lot of billions of money flow into startup ecosystem that help, exactly like you mentioned, a company like Kite, or even like more hyper growth stage of startup to blast through their token to find the growth, while the revenue itself, the net revenue, is negative because they usually will subsidize the token
Yes.
cost a bit for their customers. And that's being said, a lot of the company actually not necessarily have defensible business model, aka once they run out of the investor money, where they get the money from potentially if there's no enough liquidity in the secondary market. So that's why people are also talking about that we need to be careful that to see how, like when the music will stop in the room.
Yeah, well, there's,
You know,
it's a great point. So there's a bunch of startups that live off startups, right? And like you could think about like, Brex, for example, Carta, which is, cap table software. So you don't need, so a big publicly traded company is never going to use Carta. Like, it's cap table software for venture-backed companies. So there's a whole bunch of companies that live off of the health of the startup ecosystem. And kind of grow up with companies as they grow up in this world. And Anthropic, and for sure, has done a lot of that, and so has OpenAI. Like a lot of money is coming into these companies. A lot of heavy use is like these very well capitalized startups, and many of them aren't going to make it. They're going to go away, and a lot of it is subsidized use, right? I mean, it's some version, depending on what the product is. You're running up inference costs, and you're using venture dollars to fund inference costs to do something against a price point in the market that's lower than your actual, delivery costs. But I think, but of course, Anthropic and OpenAI and Google, like the labs are all very aware of this, and they also realize that like the big prize is not the startup world; it's the kind of the giant companies with giant revenues. And so, if you look at kind of their product roadmap, but also their go-to-markets, they've heavily, particularly in the past couple of months, they've heavily kind of pivoted to focus on, like really getting the systems ready for enterprise deployment, right? And that's about a number of things. I mean, that's dealing with like the kind of the problem that Kite deals with, right? Like, I mean, so you're, in any payment system, in a novel payment system, you're going to have to deal with like questions like, identity and reputation and who and recourse, like, who's responsible if there's a problem. And, and in a way, this is the general LLM problem with agentic deployment. So Anthropic and OpenAI have done these partnerships with, Blackstone and whoever else to like, the giant big names of the world, to go out and help them deploy. And that's partly about building reputation and credibility and systems for resolution if there's a problem, and all the things like you're building, but sort of at the level of enterprise AI deployment. And then of course the other thing that's happening, and the kind of the breathtaking thing, is just, I mean, it's the bash command. Like it's not it's not the brain so much as like all the things that are being built around the brain to like make these systems reliable, to brilliantly conduct themselves in repeatable workflows. And that's just been kind of in the last 6 months incredible. All the things that have happened around, just, and it does feel like, I mean, like, so if you open up the hood, it feels like it's just a ton of, deploying kind of Unix command lines to invoke other software systems to wrap the agents, and hold them into check. And so all of that's happening as a way for the labs to build businesses in sort of very large enterprise customers, and I see it all kind of, it's all begun, like it's really begun.
Yeah, Toby, that's exactly, I felt like starting from 2-3 months ago, OpenAI and Anthropic both started this head-to-head compete on the PE race, right? Like they gave like billions of dollars to PE funds to help them to acquire even like the traditional businesses, to get into the traditional world where is the big money sit for a lot of like the large enterprises, and basically use the similar model as Palantir doing sending people to those companies, doing front deployments and literally like insert, like you say, the command line
Yeah.
into their workflow, to get
Yeah.
to mitigate, I think, the risk of relying on too much of the healthiness of startup ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, it's the big money's all come in now, and like, I mean, the other place where you really see it is now the largest pools of capital in the world are financing data centers, kind of in project finance land, instead of just having the hyperscalers do all of this on their balance sheet. So there's really been, I mean, I think we're at the point now where nearly everybody agrees this is a huge deal. Like, I mean, I can remember, my kind of view of this has not really shifted over the past 2.5 years. But I think, 2.5 years ago, if we would have had this conversation, everybody would have kind of said, "You're crazy, dude." But now I think people really just agree, like, this is happening, and it's going to change nearly everything about everything. And I'm sitting in Manhattan now, kind of looking out my window over the city, and and the major financial institutions that are around the block, the PE firms that are a few bucks north of me, and the banks that are all around me. Like, they're living and breathing this now too, in terms of everything that they're doing.
That's very cool. And again, we'll see how the word is going. But Toby, thank you so much. I think we're getting the end of the session, and curious if there's any last thing that or wisdom you want to share with the audience, who I think many of them probably are also trying to figure out how would they continue their career, their life, and everything with now the involvement of AI.
Yeah, I mean, I think on that front, the one thing that everybody should remember is that we're kind of, in a way, we're all on this boat together. So I think, there's a lot of people who are individually worried, and I understand why. I mean, and I am at many points in time, but I mean, I think we're all in this boat together. So, like, let's hope that the worst case scenarios aren't going to happen, because like we won't let them happen. We being, hopefully, societies and governments. But what we didn't do in this hour-long conversation is talk much about agentic commerce, and I think this is amazing to think about, like what the future might look like. And then it's also like fascinating. I mean, you guys probably saw this. If not, then I need to keep remembering more to send you papers. But there are a couple of papers that came out in the last week or two, that are up on archive, that kind of show, like, so if you think about Silicon Valley, I mean, a shocking fraction of the financing of Silicon Valley is ad money. Like, I mean, it's been, right. I mean, it's why products are free, right? I mean, the only reason products are free is because you're listening to ads or you're targeted by ads or something. And like, of course, this explains all of Google and all of Meta and all of TikTok. And like, we have these amazing products that are ad paid. And so you have this kind of like hope for agent commerce, which would change everything if it worked this way, where like the agents ignore the ads, right? I mean, it's like Agentic. I can deploy an agent to go out and find me like the best deal or the product that's a perfect fit for me because it knows me, and and then you're setting up the infrastructure to make that happen, which is super cool. So there's a couple papers that have already come out showing like how much ad dollars have already penetrated everything that happens. Like there's already systems in place where if I ask Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude to recommend an inexpensive flight, that is not what I get, and that it's actually even more in a much more profound way. It's not what I get. There's actual price discrimination in ways that like have never happened. Like, so I always used to, I mean, like, Scott, you had this background at Uber, and I always used to ask myself, like, does Uber know, like, does it know how, I mean, because they probably do, like, you figure out how important it is for me to get from point A to B. Like if I'm going to the airport or something, I got to get there. And, like you have a great approximation of my income and wealth. Like, where I live, where I travel to, like you have all the data that you can pull together. And like, so you could have different prices for everybody. You could have a pricing model that's like person specific, and and it looks like in AI, like, we deploy agents already. I mean, Claude, when I tell Claude or Gemini to go find me a product, I'm deploying it's an agentic system. I'm deploying my agent, and it's already now twisted up with like, vested interests and ad dollars and all the things. So sometime we'll do this again and let's walk through. I mean, then I'm going to ask you guys the questions and you can tell me like how this is all going to sort out, because it's super fascinating.
Definitely will keep this question in mind. And we do have some discussions in intern about this before, but let's keep it for the next time, Toby, that when we catch up again. And definitely, hopefully at that time, we'll have more thoughts and more data points to share. Yeah.
Sounds great. Great talking to you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Toby. Really appreciate your time. And as we all know, that you're super busy, and thanks for the wisdom and observations that you shared with us and our audience. And let's call it a day. And
All right.
have a great Memorial long weekend.
All right, you guys too. I'll see you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Toby.
All right, bye-bye.